Hello, welcome on the next lecture on the topic of product energy efficiency requirements. So today the aim of the lecture is to understand the reasons why energy efficiency is necessary, why companies should consider it, and understand how it plays out in Europe's scale. So firstly, we'll look at some tools for how to make the energy efficiency evaluation easier. We look at also some examples and where to find information on this topic, and to have a better understanding also how are these requirements set. We will look at the methods how these requirements are developed. And lastly, as to summarize this, we will look at why actually they're needed, how they impact not only the companies themselves, but the society, the society, the consumers, the countries, and the region as a whole. So we live in the European Union, and if we can imagine that it's like a big company, and every company has its goals, and every company has its budget. So if you imagine that this company needs to earn money, they need to think how to make their budget in a positive way. And initially the companies look only at the financial aspects, but we know that lately it has been changed. So we look not only at the financial, we look also at the social aspects as well, and also environmental aspects. So with the increase of environmental problems, we know that to produce more energy in Europe, we need to build more power stations. So as a company, you know that you have more impact on the environmental side, so you need to set some kind of goals how to reduce this impact. And what Europe did with the help of European Commission, Europe and we as a society, we decided to set up targets. So we had the first targets set up on the year 2009, and the initial targets were to reduce the energy consumption, or in other ways to increase the energy efficiency by 20%. And it was comparing to the year 1990, or the 1990 level, we can say. So later in the year 2018, we understood that how the things are going. We could see how are the levels of energy consumption going. Also, we could understand better how the climate change is happening, for example. And so we know that we have to maybe change these goals and even maybe make them bigger. And so in 2018, the goal was set comparing the future levels of consumption, that is the year 2030. We need to increase energy efficiency now by 32%. And so we can see that it's been changing with the time. Looking at this picture, there's that range from 2005 till 2030. And it shows the energy consumption of 27 European Union countries. In the year 2005, the energy consumption of these countries were close to 1,050 million tons of oil equivalent. So from 2005, we can see the next target we had set in was 2020, and this green line was showing the amount we need to reach. So, or reduction we need to reach. And of course, in real life, we don't go by the straight lines. We have ups and downs, and we can see that in the first years, the consumption change wasn't big. But then in later years, we have reduction even below the targets. But starting from closer to 2018-19, there was again increase in the consumption. Now comes pandemic, we have year 2020, and the reduction of course decreased, and so we met the goal set in 2009, And in the end, in 2020, we had reduced the consumption down to 907 million tons of oil equivalent. But looking at 2030, we see that this projection or this dashed line is steeper. So what do we do? What the European Union does is we make the goals or the requirements stricter. So as a company, as a society, or entrepreneurs or anyone have to understand that the regulations will become stricter. We will have maybe more products being affected by these regulations. Or the existing regulations might include broader or more strict requirements of already existing requirements. So that is what's planning to come ahead. So there are two main instruments in EU how the energy efficiency requirements are affected, and the first tool is Ecodesign Directive. Directives and Ecodesign Directive is a framework. So if you imagine like a building where you first build the framework, just the outside kind of structure of the building, so is these directives. It only gives the main framework, but it doesn't specify very directly, or it isn't too specific about each product groups. So this framework, what it does, it sets up kind of requirements for member states, what they need to do to fulfill the requirements of a bigger Europe idea. And of course, one of these ideas is to combat climate change, to reduce the consumption, to increase the quality of life, reduce the environmental impacts, and so on. And so the eco-design is just one of those tools. For Ecodesign Directive, the main thing what maybe users or consumers see is the quality of, actually the CE mark translates in English from French as a European conformity. So this mark is put on the products by the companies if the product meets the requirements set in directive. So, and the second one, maybe also more familiar with the consumers, is the energy labeling. So these on the right side we see these labels put on the fridges and on home appliances, and we have already been used to looking at them when we buy the products. So what it shows is how well this product compares to set kind of levels of consumptions. There are other instruments, less known maybe, but there are for reaching higher goals. So we have eco-labels. So eco-labels help to identify the products which reduce the environment impact, and they're also the products which usually lead in the energy efficiency aspects. And then there are also green public procurements. So in the later slides we'll see that increasing energy efficiency of products comes at a cost. So the products might end up costing more, especially in the initial phases. When you produce a new product, you need to find buyers for it, you need to find a market for it. So one way how to assist in this is to use like institutional bigger players, like for example, all the government buildings need to have some kind of, let's say, computers. And so we can use these bigger kind of players, and we can apply requirement that they need to buy everything through these green public procurements. And in these green public procurements, we say that they need to buy, for example, computers with the eco labels. So it's a way how to maybe find a marketplace, and we know any product is a part of a system where if you produce more, it costs less. And so these green procurements are like a first step on that road for the product to become cheaper for rest of the people. So, and there are kind of these four tools are playing along each other, but as eco-design is like the first in the step of the product becoming more energy efficient. So we have the first, the worst players of the market, the ones which are less efficient and so on. So Eco Design Directive just bans these products outright. So the Eco Label and GPP are voluntary, but Eco Design and energy labeling, those are obligatory things that companies and need to take into consideration. So Eco Design cuts out the worst performers of the market, so we don't have them. They can't be sold in shops anymore. Then we have energy labeling, which assists consumers on buying the most energy efficient products. So when we go to shops, we make our decisions on the price, and now the eco labeling is kind of assisting us. For example, if we see the two products in comparison, we can start to think not only about the upfront costs, but we can start to think also about the long term. So how much energy will this product consume when we're going to use it for next 5 years maybe. So maybe there's giving incentive for people sometimes just to, I don't know, say that they have most energy efficient system in the house. They are very green thinking and so on. So people like to portray themselves as well as thinking about climate change and those aspects. So it's a way how to make companies make these products. They want to make it make their products also. They have an image of thinking about environmental aspects. So in the other tools, the GPP and eco labels, they are the ones to just take it a step further. So the Eco Design Directive, as I said, those are obligations for manufacturers, but the companies, of course, can think of those as obligations as a problem, as an obstacle, or they can use these obligations as a way to put their product in a better light than other products. So they can follow the eco design requirements. They can follow the guidelines set out how to make their products better, and so they can make it more competitive, their product. But of course, it always comes with some kind of cost. So it's an optimization problem for companies themselves. So what EU does, how it helps, it tries to make these harmonized standards. So those are not standards you need to follow obligatory, but if you wanna make sure that your products which you want to put in the market, as I said, the manufacturer is responsible to put on this CE mark on the product, and if for some reason something happens or they need to prove that this product actually meets these CE standards, CE requirements, then they might want to test these products. So they can test them, and to know how to test them, there are these harmonized standards. So one option is to go to the labs which are following these standards, but generally a lot of these assessments are done as self-assessments. So the companies themselves can assess it, and it's cheaper and doesn't add that much of a cost for the product itself. So afterwards you need to affix the CE marking on your product. And another thing is that a lot of products, of course, are not only produced locally in EU, but are imported from the outside. So in that case, the importer takes on the role and responsibilities of the manufacturer. So if you're importing something, you need to make sure that the product meets the CE standard requirements, and so usually that's done anyway by the manufacturer, but the importer makes sure that the manufacturer knows these requirements as well. So there are 17 main categories in Eco Design Directive. So all these electric products are put in these main categories, such as lighting, heaters, refrigerators, and some of these categories have multiple product groups. So in total there are 31 product groups, and so each of these product groups are made so you can have more specific requirements. One might think that okay, more documents and so on is bad, But actually it's good for companies because you don't have some kind of vague requirements. You have quite specific requirements for your product, and it's easier to follow them than for something which is not as descriptive and specific. So more of these are placed in the regulations, but right now, for example, the heater section have a separate requirements for solid fuel boilers, for cooling products, and for space heaters, for example. But the companies, if you're making any of these products or if you're importing them, it's still could be quite hard to find where to find all the documents or the requirements to make sure you're following them. So there is one tool, I think, which is very helpful. So it's called Access to Markets. And so this tool is designed to provide a kind of one-stop place for information about duties, about taxes, and also the ones more relevant to this topic are the requirements on energy efficiency based on eco-design, based on energy labeling, these frameworks. So it provides information for all EU countries, and also it takes into account around 120 other markets around the world. Because, of course, the requirements are not only, as I mentioned, also includes duties and taxes, and they change based from where it comes. Also, nowadays we know there are also sanctions. So things such as importing from some countries or exporting to some countries can be outright banned due to the sanctions. So for anyone to find this information, first you need the HS code. HS stands for Harmonized System. So this code is used for every product put on the market that have the HS code, and so you need to find the code first, and then you can place the origin country and the country where you're shipping it to. And in this case, I'll use the example for HS code for the LCD display. And in this case, it's manufactured in China and will be sold in Latvia. Once you put in the HS code, depends how specifically you know. If you don't know, there are HS kind of head groups, head codes, and then you can use the product tree to kind of go more deeper and find very specifically your product with your specific technical parameters. And so in this case, I already have done it. I have opened, once you get to the specific product, you can click on it, and you can see on the left there's a lot of options, but the ones we care in this presentation and are about the energy efficiency requirements. So then once you click that, you get links to the eco-design requirements and energy labeling requirements. So when you go to the eco-design requirements, again, it mentions the most, summarizes the main information. In this case, if you want to find specifics on how to test your product, there are links given to the specific regulation. So as I mentioned before, we have this framework of eco-design, but we have specific regulations for the products. So when we go to this product, then this product is going to have a specific descriptions how to test it, how for it to reach the requirements necessary. So that's why there's a mention link for this specific regulation, and then there's also the annex. Annexes contain already specific formulas, as we see in the next slide here. This is information how to calculate the energy efficiency index. So we can see that this is an imperative formula. There's a formula where we need to put in the power, again specifically measured power, so again standards how to measure this power, and then the area of screen size. And so this helps to use any kind of display in the market which fits under this group, and we can use the same formula to calculate this index. And then next we have these requirements set based on this index. we could see in the formula that we have a power on the top of the formula equation, and so if the power is bigger, the index is bigger. The power is the energy what the screen consumes, or how much power it needs to be run. So bigger the consumption or less inefficient, the bigger is this index. So we can see here that we have two dates. We have first the requirements which are enforced now, and then we have requirements starting from the March 1st of 2023. And we can see, of course, they are decreasing. So it means that for these specific displays to be able to be sold on the market, they need to be consuming less energy than when you calculate the EEE than set in this annex. Another thing you can find in the same page is the link to the the energy labeling requirements. Here, more specific information is given about the label itself. What do you need to put on the label, the sizes of it, and how do you calculate some specific indicators. And also for some aspects it links back to the Ecodesign Directive. So they're both interconnected, and this label, so we have seen more often. It contains 10 information points, and recently it was updated. Before we had maybe only these letters as groups. Now it also includes some information about such as kilowatt hours. Maybe not for everyone it's going to mean something, but for some people they can choose even more. So you can maybe two displays in the same energy efficiency group, but you can, for example, they're both in a group B, but you can see now very specifically how many kilowatt hours it's going to consume per specific amount of hours. So you can choose now and even more, make your decision even in more specific information. So not all information, of course, is that easily understood. So that's why this tool, Access to Markets, gives also the context, both for the eco design, for the energy labeling, and also for the eco labels. In case of Latvia, we have contacts for the ministry, and for eco labels we have contacts for the Latvian Environment, Geology and Meteorology Center. So they can assist companies how to understand these rules and how to take them into account when they try to either import products, produce, or something in between or else. So we saw how energy efficiency requirements are, why are they needed. We could see that some of the tools in Europe we have how to take them into account, how to calculate them, where to find the documents. But it's also important to understand how these documents come around, so the companies wouldn't be inclined to be very negative about it. So if you understand how are they developed, you will see that it's quite an open system, and it takes into account a lot of considerations. One of the first requirements for any products to be regulated by these requirements is how many products are put in the market. So indicatively it says that something if is sold more than 200,000 units per year, let's say in Europe, then it might start to be regulated. The studies will be started to do, understand if this product has a lot of impact or not, and does it have maybe high potential. So not only if you sell a lot of them, but if you have environmental impact or significant potential for improvement, it could be put under requirements next. So the idea is to go from the bigger targets to the smaller ones, and but of course the problem is that it changes in a time. So we have innovative technology advancements. We have new products coming into the market. Old ones are disappearing. And for example, now maybe we started to build small TVs. We had bigger TVs. Now TVs are replaced by projectors, At some point projectors were used for one thing, now they're used for home TV. So the things change, and and the energy consumption by them change, and so these energy requirements, the calculation methods and everything needs to advance as well. When these energy efficiency requirements are set, there are a number of requirements that need to be followed. Firstly, there should be no negative impacts on functionality. In the image on the right example, of course, given we all know we can make the screens dimmer, but if the screen is dimmer, we no longer can use the same efficiency or quality or ease of use in brighter conditions. So it will use less energy, but it loses its functionality. So this is not what is acceptable. So that's why, of course, the comparisons are done for the same brightnesses. Secondly, of course, we cannot sacrifice the health and safety of the product. We cannot maybe use some kind of structural materials, to use less plastics, use less raw materials and so on. If it loses durability, that goes completely against the circular thinking that we want to make products more durable, more long-lasting, more repairable, and so on. So we can't risk any safety and health issues. And thirdly, be affordability. So, of course, all of these aspects might increase the price, but sometimes there are ways how to replace some materials, maybe somehow recover some of the used products, some partially maybe, and so in that way maybe we can even maybe reduce or at least keep the prices pretty much the same. And the last one would be to not impact the competitiveness. So we want the companies, so they can't say that these requirements restrict them from producing some products. Let's say if we put a requirement that only TVs with a specific brightness can be used, maybe there are some TVs which use different technology, are more energy efficient, but they cannot go to that brightness, then they cannot be produced and put on the market. Or maybe some technology, as we know, all these LEDs, LCDs, OLEDs, and everything in between, some of them might be patented. So if the patent holder doesn't want to license it, then it will, and if we require it, this technology, to reach the required levels, then of course we're putting only maybe one company as the only provider of this product. So aspects like that need to be taken into consideration as well. And and lastly, actually the other last thing is that so the idea is not to put too excessive administrative burdens on the companies and the manufacturers. There is additional, of course, burden to follow all these requirements, but the idea is to somehow make it that it's still possible to do it, and also help the manufacturers to know their supply chains better. So here is a big picture graph on all the steps taken for any of these regulations to come into the force. As we can see at the bottom, it says that it's going to takes around 4 to 5 years for any of these regulations to come into the force. So there's a lot of steps that need to be taken, and it takes time. And that's why it can be difficult if new innovative products are coming into the market. So not necessarily every time it's going to be 4 to 5 years if it's only just a subgroup or something. But if we make a study and we understand there's a new product, let's say although heat pumps already are included, but let's say before they weren't, and you make a study of specifically heat pumps. So that might take 5 years to understand all the impacts and possible outcomes. And that's why it also takes long, because you need the consultations. You have consultations with the NGOs, with the companies, with the national institutions, a lot of associations we have. So they all come to the table on deciding how the end regulation is going to look. And so one of the first steps is to kind of decide on what are the main drivers, so existing kind of also the problems, what could be the specific objectives we want to achieve, and then also the measures. For example, so for some existing things as displays, we might have a problem that the efficiency is given per area unit, and the thing is that the TVs become bigger themselves, and energy consumption was going to grow with the size. So we might have energy efficient, let's say, how much energy we use per one small area, but if the area becomes bigger, then of course the total energy consumption is going to grow as well. And so to combat this issue, we need to, again, rescale the efficiency. We need to make sure that if the producers make TVs, we make them even more efficient. So if you make a bigger TV, it might become bigger, but still use the same energy as before, as the smaller screen before, because it's more efficient. And other problems are like the circularity. If the materials used, can they be recovered? Are they identifiable? If we use HDPE plastic somewhere, when we take apart this TV, does the company doing it will be able to afterwards to sell this plastic? Okay, and moving on, we have here are the example of the options. So when we make these, when they make these studies, they make options on which to kind of discuss on. So we have first option is usually the business as usual. So for short, it's BAU. And then there we make no changes. Maybe the existing regulations are fine, we don't need no changes. Then the option 2 is the base case improvement. So we for example, before we saw that we use this energy efficiency index to understand how much more efficient the products need to become. We maybe add some other things as changing the labels, rescaling, maybe some new methods on testing it. And so we have this, we call this eco option. And then we have another 2 options which are kind of eco options, but one is more stricter, one is more lenient. For all these stakeholders, all these NGOs and all the other ones are using these kind of options to discuss which one of these would be most reasonable, but also usually the NGOs are the ones which are going to push for more stricter ones. The companies are maybe going to try to understand which are reasonable for them to actually achieve the technology they and production rates and so on they have. So it's a discussion, and the European Commission needs to decide on it. So yeah, and why do we need these all the requirements? And I'll go over some of these reasons why energy efficiency requirements are needed. So the first and the obvious one, of course, is we need to reduce the energy consumption. And how do we produce energy? Well, in Europe, still a large share of energy is produced by burning fossil fuels. Still, we have some nuclear. We are becoming now more reliant on renewables, but still a big part in some countries, especially now, losing gas. So I have replaced gas with, for example, more coal power. So even more pollution comes out from producing each unit of energy. So if we can reduce the energy consumption, we can reduce the emissions themselves as well. The third one will be to reduce the expenditure. So as we talked about, some products are becoming bigger and we make them more efficient, and then it doesn't change too much in energy consumption. But in some cases, it's different. We can increase the efficiency, we can reduce the energy costs during the lifetime. So the users are saving money, but it's not only consumers which are beneficiaries. In this market we see very well, for example, we lost the supplier of gas due to the political environment, the energy prices rose. And we know that in governments, the first ones which will not get the gas if there is not enough are the companies. So a lot of local manufacturers might have to close the production if we don't have enough gas available. So of course it's also interesting to companies to reduce these consumptions so that they don't have to pay so much for production. And the last one is to balance out the living standards, because we earn more, we have better living standards, we buy more, and so in the end we end up using too much energy. So looking at the first one, here's an example of, so this is from before when the analysis was done, how much energy we can save by eco-design and energy labeling these frameworks. And it was calculated that in 2020, so a year, 2 years ago, we saved 10% energy compared to scenario if it was business as usual. So no directives influencing the use, and for 2030 it's projected that we will save more, 18%. Here are some examples for some products, how they have changed in efficiency. For example, TVs, so they have become bigger, but the specific energy use, so watts per square centimeter or something else, have decreased around 9-fold. So even though we can come from 19-inch to 43-inch, the power has slightly reduced from 90 watts to 81 watts. But we can see in the graph that it's projected that this decrease will slow down. So it could be technological advancements are more focused now on quality, but that we don't know how to achieve even more energy efficient screens, or the benefits gained for each development are not as big. For other products such as space heating, we can see that the efficiency have increased by 90%, mostly due to the use of condensing gas boilers and also increased use of heat pumps. Similarly, in the water heater sector, larger share is being produced by solar energy. Also more efficient heat pumps have led to a 14% increase, and for electric motors again, a different case, we have a 12% increase in energy efficiency due to the use of variable speed motors. So we can change how quickly something runs. The next one is to see how the emissions have reduced. So in this graph shows from 1990 till 2050. So everything we compare is starting from 1990. We can see that the graph is given in the million tons of CO2 equivalents. So all kind of emission gases are calculated into CO2 equivalents. And we can see that initially there is not a big change. We have again same percent, 18% needs to be reduced to 2030. So we can see it's the same as the amount of energy we need to reduce, because the emissions go along with the energy production from the fossil fuels. But of course this can change. If we start to put a lot more renewables, then we won't have to spend, there won't be that much emissions from the energy production, and we might reach the goals even sooner. But a big part of this graph, the section is coming from the heating sector. So if we electrify the heating sector, if the electricity production is fossil free, then of course it's going to be easier to achieve these goals and help reduce the impacts on the climate change. Deduction of expenditure. On the left graph we can see that there's an increase in the cost for consumers, how much they will pay. And in some way, of course, we might think that it's a negative, but we need to remember that energy shouldn't be cheap. Energy shouldn't be that cheap that we are wasting it. It should be expensive enough so we can afford it, or in some ways make everyone can afford it, but it shouldn't be cheap so it's not wasted. And so of course in products that is the same. when the living standards increase and they provide all the basic necessities, we want these products not to be super cheap. We want, and that's why if we can make them more energy efficient, we can make them more circular, but if it comes with a little bit of added cost, it should be fine. But anyway, even if they become more costlier, it's projected that by 2030, all these directives, it's going to result in 116 billion euros saved. And the last thing is about the living standards, and here again just one example, and this example is for Central Air Cooling Products Group. So we can see that on the top left, these two graphs are about how many are sold and how many are in stock. So the number of units, we know that there's going to be more people, and well, we assume there's going to be more people who can afford them. We know that the climate change maybe might make the summers more unbearable, so more people might try to replace the cost of something else just to have the central cooling options in their buildings, and so we know they're going to increase in the number. But by using these energy efficiency measures, we can make sure that at least we're not increasing the energy consumption. So that is again a case where we want to have it's fine that population have a better living standards, but we cannot sacrifice it on the side of the energy production. So to summarize all the energy efficiency requirement topic, the main tools in Europe for energy efficiency are the two frameworks. We have the eco-design framework and we have the energy labeling regulation. They are being updated, so they change, and the updates come with the new specific requirements for new products. At the moment there are 31 product groups covered, but it could increase in a larger number because some of the products might be sold in larger numbers if they become necessary as a cooling units mentioned before. So there are specific regulations developed for each of these groups. So we know that we can use the access to markets tool to find the rules of testing and how they need to follow these requirements in this tool as well. And also this tool, it can be used to see how there are more information about the markets as well from the sanctions, also to see how many are already shipped to Europe, for example, or to Latvia from China in the given example, and can help the manufacturers to decide on the importing routes. So we saw that the regulations, they take around 4 to 5 years to develop, so they take into account a lot of stakeholders. So all these groups, they have a say on how the final requirements are gonna look. And so the energy efficiency requirements are needed to reduce the energy consumption. So that is the main kind of aim. Of course, maybe even the bigger aim is to combat the climate changes, which comes with a lot of extra costs. You know, the floods, so the heat waves, everything, and the increases the unsafety for food production and so on. So a lot of everything, of course, is interchanged, but from these directive points of view, the energy consumption is kind of the main aim, and with that comes the saving, maybe saving in money, or maybe keeping it the same cost, but making sure the main groups, target groups, are protected. So that also comes with a need for reduction in emissions, because the less protected target groups are the most vulnerable, and they need to have this protection. So that is in a summary for this topic, and in the next lectures we will see some other uses, how Europe tries to reach this goal of circularity. Thank you for listening to the lecture. I hope it gave you an insight how energy efficiency requirements are not only a burden for companies, but also they're gonna help in developing and innovating new products.